That's the one.
Okay.
Now the sound.
Can you
Yep, I
hear
can
us
hear ya.
now?
Cool.
Sweet. Starting over. Welcome again, everybody, to the Genus Brewing live stream. Live stream we do every single Saturday, Sunday, one of those days.
No technical difficulties.
Ever. Never have any technical difficulties. We always start right on time with the exact right amount of, what's a good descriptive word of what we do?
Craziness?
Pizzazz? Let's go. Awesomeness. Today we're joined with Trent from Trailbreaker Cider Company. Trent has been in the cider company owning business for
So since
years?
2012, technically, I kind of count end of 2013 by the time we really started making any commercially viable ciders.
Yeah.
So it's been almost 10 years.
And way back in the beginning, you bought a space and you're doing a lot of like carboys and stuff like that. Like you did a lot of 5-gallon batches at the beginning, right?
Yeah, so when we first started, I have an old video I found like maybe about a year ago from that first year. The building that we were in down in Pullman that you were mentioning before our sound difficulties, we had a clean room during construction, and I had nothing but 5-gallon. I had batches as small as a little wine bottle of testing different yeast, going to places like this to try to figure out what yeast and apple combinations we wanted to use for everything. So yeah, that was it. Steadily grew from there, like many cideries or breweries. So it's a fairly typical small batch to now large batch growth model that most places experience.
John Gakio, thank you so much for the super chat. Yeah, it's a really fun story because we both started down in Pullman. I worked at Birch and Barley at the same time I worked at Tri-State. That's what it's called.
Can we drink this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's your cider. I don't know. Can we? Is this the poison one or not?
Yep. This is the one we could drink.
Yeah. All right. Perfect. But yeah, so we knew each other in the beer cider making kind of world way down there, and where you moved up to is like 2 miles away from here.
Yeah, it's funny. I could still remember the first time I met you. I think you were probably a dishwasher or something like that at a bar, doing a second job or third job or fourth job or something, and
As one does.
and we obviously later learned that what I did and what you were interested in were along the same lines. And then to see you come into our cidery one day and learn that you had opened this place was kind of like that is a small world. Even here, that was a small world.
Yeah, that's crazy close, which is awesome. And your cider is beautiful, by the way. You've seen me over there a handful of times with my family. There's a nice like little yard area over there.
Family-friendly spot that I think this area, certainly the Liberty Lake area, needed something like that before we came in there. And a few things have followed with the brewery and the winery behind us there.
Do you have a lot of seasonality having that big outdoor space? Is it like a...
Definitely. Our summer months, I think cider in general is definitely a summer beverage, right? So I think it has and we can get into our ciders a little bit, I'm sure, but while ours aren't super sweet, they're definitely still more of a refreshing drink, I think. They don't have the bitter direction necessarily on a fermented product. Certainly our style lends itself to summery beverages. The outdoor seating space, I think, is an obvious activity in the summertime. But we're in our peak right now, no doubt about that.
Yeah, but you also do distro and stuff like that. So you have some things that kind of go year round. But yeah, that's awesome. So the normal plot of the show, since this is your first time on, is we usually talk about some general news. So for Genus's news, we just finished up Brewfest over
In Redmond, Washington Brewers Fest, we were out of 96 breweries. We were 12th. It was awesome seeing Adam Chumley, Daniel, and actually a couple other homebrewers I randomly ran into while I was wearing Genus shirts.
Yeah.
So,
A handful of people over there supporting us, and I heard a lot of good stories from you and from Sky and Warren and Jess. Like a lot of people coming up and talking to the crew, so that's really awesome.
Yeah, people love the fact that we do weird beers, and I have found out that Washington Brewers actually does a strange brew fest over in Seattle.
Ooh.
So, Peter, we should probably sign up for that.
All right, someone on Seattle's got to volunteer to help pour for us.
Or I can just go back over.
That's true. Me too. Maybe I can make it to one of these. That's probably during cross-country season, though.
Reminder, we will not be live streaming next week because I kind of want to return Peter to his wife.
Yeah, she'd probably be. I've been working a lot lately. Other thing in the Genus Brewing world, I don't know if you want to follow us on Instagram, but Ryan's back. Ryan is our former media guy, still our media guy, but he had to take a hiatus because of other work that he was doing and just needed a break. So he is back, and so that is going to help our production getting videos out, including the bread beer video, which is, I think, ready to go. I just don't think we published it yet. I think that's all we got for Genus News. What do you got coming up in Trailbreaker?
We have a lot of just summer activities. We do, I don't know how many people are aware that we do pro wrestling.
Oh, yeah, that's
at
awesome.
Relentless Wrestling. If you go on social media, I think it's at Relentless Wrestling. They do about 8 events a year, almost once a month. They're doing, I don't know if you guys attend or have heard of Crave here in the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Food and beverage show. It's usually like a 3-day show. They're doing a Burger Smackdown
Oh, wow.
on, I believe it's Thursday night with wrestling.
Is that over at Mirabu?
It's at the Center Place, the outside part of Center Place, out of around Mirabu Point, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Nice.
Yep, up there. And then the next day they're going to do wrestling at Trailbreaker. Usually that's on a Saturday. They're going to do it on a Friday. So I personally get a lot of enjoyment out of watching that. And if you've never been to a pro wrestling show, I can tell you this in particular is far better than my expectations were
Awesome.
going into it. It is certainly one step maybe short of what you see on the high level television, but remarkably entertaining for sure. Family, I've had little old ladies in their 70s, wildly entertained. Probably the men in very small bikinis probably has something to do with that, I'm guessing. But yeah, we've got that going on, and just a lot of, it's awesome to see beer and cider tasting events happening again after the 2+ year hiatus it seems like we've had.
Oh, yeah.
So we're trying to get involved in as many of those as we can. We do a lot of kind of off-site tastings for business openings or for some other community events often that pop up. So
nice.
You'll see Trailbreaker cider at more and more of those too this summer.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember the first time going into one of those wrestling, or going to Trailbreaker, not knowing that wrestling was going on, and watching it happen in there. It's like, wow, this is amazing. And you guys get a crowd there too.
Yeah, it's a totally different crowd than we probably normally get, in a good way, in a healthy way. I think it's people that wouldn't necessarily give a cidery a chance, but I found as they come back every month, we have new cider drinkers that have discovered that it's a viable option. Even if you're a beer drinker, it's still fun to mix it up.
Well, you guys do a great job, and also you've got like really good to-go packages too. So I always I'll go there and grab a couple ciders, and then probably walk with a 12-pack on the hand. I'm like, it's good
now
as you
that
can get it in the stores.
We're canning, it makes everything a little easier to get into people's hands, and
Hey,
it's summer. We
Peter,
take
let's
it every.
be honest. It's Lisa telling you you're walking away with a 12-pack of cider.
She's the first 6. I'm the like, wow, if we're gonna get 6, why not get 12?
Lisa
Spicy
calls
peach.
out spicy peach.
Yeah, spicy peach.
And that's no joke. I
it's good.
Personally, I'm not a big spice person, so I challenge myself to drink a pint of that every time about once every couple weeks, and I am about 2/3 down the glass now before I have to give up. But it's a spicy glass of cider.
It's
There's
so
no doubt
good.
about that.
I think it'd be fun to have so we've had the spicy peach on a handful of times here, and usually what we do with people is some people will get it straight, and sometimes we'll have something like the Big Pippin on where it's a sweeter cider.
Blend it.
Exactly. We'll be like, hey, we'll just do half the spice and half the Big Pippin, and then you get the experience without the direct, top amount of heat that you get there.
You're speaking my language.
All right, is that all you got for news coming up?
Yeah, I think it's summer. We're busy.
I'm also going to call out for Trailbreaker. If anyone is looking for an awesome venue to have an event like either a wedding or anything else, contact Trent at Trailbreaker.
Yep. If you go to our website, there's a tab there where you can put in. I mean, it can be. I think we usually limit it to 12 or more people for that kind of request, but we have a lot of space inside and out to kind of allow people to. It could be 12 people for a small birthday party, to retirement parties. We do weddings. We occasionally close the facility for larger events, but it's actually again a underserved area in terms of event space.
Yeah.
That's affordable. You can get food. You can obviously get beer and cider there. and wine. So it kind of fills that niche market that doesn't really exist out kind of between Coeur d'Alene and Spokane.
So
Yeah, I
hit
was
'em
gonna
up.
say one of my friends just got married last weekend there.
Yeah,
And seeing her photos was amazing.
we have another one this Friday coming up, and it's fun to see those. When I think of a wedding, especially, it's kind of a neat venue. If I went to a cidery or a brewery for a wedding, of which I have not done outside of our facility, I feel like that's the wedding I would remember the most.
Oh yeah. Weddings are
for
supposed
us,
to be a
that's
party.
obvious, but I think for a lot of people, it's just kind of a. What would you say?
Weddings are supposed to be a party. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be a chill hangout spot. So
Yep.
if you're the kind of person who likes to chill and hang out at a nice facility cidery, then hell yeah. Well, if that's all we got for news, that means it's time for our beer of the week. Bump 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 beer of the week. Yeah. And obviously we're talking about cider this week.
It's okay. We'll take it.
Cider of the week. So what I'm going to lead this one on to you kind of. And so when we're talking about cider, I know you can kind of niche down into specific types of cider, but on the kind of on the broad scale, can you kind of break down what what categories of cider really there are that you
Sure.
can go into?
So cider, kind of to give a real basic profile for cider in the United States, is technically considered a wine. So Trailbreaker Cider is actually a winery. We could produce traditional grape wines. I tell people that facility is really a hybrid of half winery, half brewery. The only difference on the winery side, we use the same tanks that a traditional winery would use to make a white wine. And most cideries, I think that's probably true. The only difference is we squish apples, and we actually do that there. And a winery obviously typically uses grapes. And then when we package our product on the back end, it's very much like a brewery. We use a beer canning line. We obviously put it in cans, kegs, just like a brewery would from the bright tank on. So for us, we closely mimic both of those. I think ciders in general, I think there's a phrase that has come out in the last decade called American style ciders. And I think mostly that means maybe sweeter ciders or ciders made with apples that we see in the grocery store.
Okay.
Which I refer to as, or the industry refer to as dessert apple varieties. So those are, Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, Gala apples, Fuji apples, Honeycrisp. Although Honeycrisp makes a horrible juice for whatever reason. And we've never been able to figure out a good cider recipe using that because it's kind of bland.
Yeah.
The best cider typically, both for drinking, like sweet cider, non-alcoholic cider, which we also make for kids and people who just like a sweeter beverage.
Yeah.
Fresh juice, essentially. The best cider is made from a combination of a variety of apples, and that gets the more interesting cider flavor out of the apples. But interestingly enough, that same blend typically makes a more interesting hard cider too.
Yeah.
Getting bitterness, getting aromatics, things that any fermenter would probably recognize as important on the finish side of the product. But European style ciders tend to be made with kind of what they call heritage apples that now you find in people's backyards maybe. Lots of they'll use dozens of different varieties of apples to make a blend of cider.
Right.
And I think our ciders, especially like our dry and crisp, which I didn't bring today, but is kind of our signature cider. A lot of people from Europe that I meet find that cider most closely resembles what they grew up drinking, or you'd find there as their kind of run of the mill, no pun intended, cider in France especially. So that's kind of a generic rundown, but there's kind of the traditional European and what we're now doing in the United States. There's also kind of the mass-produced cider that I think most people unfortunately think about.
Angry Orchard and all that,
they're super syrupy, very, very different. And I think there's a market for that. I think, as Americans, there are a lot of people who like sweet beverages.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. So I think that we make some sweeter ciders. We tend to use real fruit juice though.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of where we separate it. And
You're not back sweetening with cane sugar or anything like that.
Exactly. We don't use any cane sugar at all. We'll use a concentrate every now and again.
It's got a higher gravity.
Yeah, something we can't make. Like the example I usually give is we make a cucumber mint.
Yeah.
And the cucumber concentrate that we used, if we put cucumbers through our apple press, it would be mostly water.
Right.
And we would have to boil it down. So we purchase a product that has no additives, the same way we make our products from the Yakima Valley.
Yeah.
And that allows us to kind of inject some of those. We make some of our own kind of extracts, if you will,
Gotcha.
from different fruits or flowers or spices, whatever.
Yeah. Reverend KY had a question a little bit earlier on saying, do you guys use VC tanks, variable capacity, or are they more just?
I found that, and I think, so back up a little bit, as a formal winemaker, I suck. But I know just enough to be dangerous in that world. And our tanks, we could certainly ferment with a 3/4 filled. That empty cavity space on the top just fills with CO2 like anything else.
Yeah.
So as long as our processes are fairly clean, we can do partial fills.
Yeah.
On any of those, and we do that periodically. We were talking, Matt and I were talking earlier about a cider I should have brought, but this show is way too early on a Sunday morning for me to be thinking correctly. But
Trent, you're not the first one to tell us that.
We made I think it's called halftime, and it's half of the product was fermented with an ale yeast.
Okay. And
the other half was I forget off the top of my head, but it's more of a traditional cider for us. And those tanks were some of our original. It's kind of our version of a pilot system now.
Yeah.
Is our original fermentation tanks.
Yeah.
That we can keep. We can do cold ferments with those. We can move them into a fridge, out of a fridge. They're very mobile for us.
Yeah.
And that was, half full. So
Yeah.
the variable capacity, I guess technically yes, but the tank itself doesn't have the lid in it or something like that.
Yeah, not a moving lid, but
yeah, exactly.
But you work it like it.
Yeah,
could be.
we operate that way. It's a little tricky when if you pull anything off that tank, you got to make sure you replace that with good
with
CO2,
not oxygen.
Exactly, some inert gas if possible.
Yeah.
So other than that, those tricks, it's essentially variable capacity.
Yeah.
And then Reverend actually had another question above that, which was, how do you approach capsaicin balance in your recipe?
Oh, with the spicy peach.
Yeah. I didn't catch.
How do you capsaicin balance? How do you make it not too spicy?
Oh well, I think that is more. So what our process for making a cider is a lot of blending. So we make some, to kind of give a little insight into our process. We make what we call our base cider. So we use a very specific blend in our 60 barrel fermenters.
Yeah.
And we now are down to like 2 or occasionally a third base cider. So we make all of our recipes on the back end by sterile filtering that cider or apple wine and then blending with either apple juice or other fruit flavors or spices.
Yeah.
In that case, we use a scorpion pepper powder. So it's a dried scorpion pepper essentially ground up, which is, 2 million Scoville units or
Spicy.
whatever. It's spicy. And we use a very specific amount of that powder in there. What we found is if we use fresh peppers, we'll occasionally do some other milder spice ciders like our Sweet Heat.
Yeah.
With a habanero. Like anybody who's ever grabbed one pepper versus another that are the exact same, the spice level can be quite varying. So
It's hard to narrow it down.
We found using some of those powders, while it's maybe not quite as pure, when you start getting larger volumes, that's the only way to go.
Yeah, that's how you not either don't get too much or don't get enough spice or get way too much spice.
Yeah, and now we can make it very consistent because of that, which is well worth that slight sacrifice on that.
I think so. Yeah.
It's like in a kitchen using dried spices versus fresh. There's always a room for that dried spice.
Yeah, I agree. There's another question that I think I can answer for what I would say, but it's what do you think the best yeast is for hard cider? For me, I use French Saison on the homebrew scale, because without the distinct ability to back sweeten with a bunch of stuff, because not everybody on the homebrew scale can do the sterile filtration or anything like that. And I don't really like saying, hey, by the way, go ahead and use some sorbates and all that.
Yeah.
So French Saison makes it sweeter.
We've used all kinds of yeasts, and I haven't found anything that I find particularly undesirable yet.
Yeah.
I mean, we've used champagne yeast. We typically lean towards white wine yeast, fruity white wine yeast, because I think that I mean, the yeast subject is large. I mean, you can go down
it's hard
some
to niche
rabbit
down that.
holes there that I'm certainly not a yeast expert, but my background was also in the culinary world. So after I left the engineering world, I went to culinary school, and so flavor and the effect on the palate is my number one focus. So we actually try to produce our base cider that is not flavorless, but very benign, not a lot of character to it, so that it can take on the other flavors that we like to add to it.
Yeah.
We don't always do that. That halftime that I was mentioning, that's more of an effort to get no back sweetening or anything like that, and we just focus on the actual fermented product.
Right.
And so, I've found experimenting with yeast is our new frontier.
Right.
I mean, that we do a lot of that, and that's if we have time and can get away from the grind of production and the distribution and that kind of thing. That's what we play with the most. We like to experiment with yeast. So there's
awesome.
There's really no wrong answer there.
Yeah, in the beer world, I know that's kind of a never-ending subject, because now you also got people doing gene mapping on yeasts and gene clipping and trying to create new yeast out of other yeasts and crazy stuff. So
I know there was
a lot.
There was a gentleman down in the Potlatch area. I think he retired from WSU a number of years ago. I want to say his name is Tim Steary, and he had grown an orchard. I think he now sells those apples to different cideries throughout the Northwest that are looking for those heritage varieties. And he had developed an entire profile of different yeasts from the European world of cider making, which I think opens up a whole nother can of worms that you can chase. But so there's lots of directions, from traditional to more modern American to kind of whatever is happening now in that world. Obviously, you guys are on the front edge of seeing that.
Yeah, we get to see all the different yeasts coming in.
Yeah.
We have so many. I think
we
have
shop here when we're looking for
crazy
small
stuff.
batch experiments. Yeah,
I think we've got 120 to 150 different kinds.
It's interesting when we first started. When you start scaling up to something like we've got now, one of my major concerns was getting some, and I ran into this as a problem, was something we could easily get.
Right.
If you want to replicate something, it's great to make something really unique, but then when you go back and you can't get that anymore.
Yeah, now I got to make 30 barrels of it.
Yeah, how do I, so some of that went into our thought process. I mean, there's small sacrifices you have to make for the artistic element to thrive, I think.
Yeah. But getting up into production, it's really hard to, half the yeast that we have, I just know you can't get for less than, on a 30 barrel pitch. Your guys' a 30 barrel, right?
We are a 60 barrel.
60 barrel. Yeah, on a 60 barrel pitch, most of these would be very cost prohibitive to get.
Yeah. So yeah, there's the cost element, and I don't know. On the winemaking side, those yeasts are not propagated. Yeah. Like a brewery would have. So they're very inexpensive. I think our 60 barrel fermentation is about $15 to $20 worth of yeast.
For the whole 60 barrels?
For the whole 60 barrels. If you buy it at a fairly large scale.
Yeah, crazy.
So we buy, 10 kilogram blocks of that that'll probably do, I don't know, however many tanks we've got there.
A 10 barrel pitch in the beer world's like $700.
Yeah, and so it's a totally different game there.
That's crazy.
And, that gets a little bit more into the science, obviously, of the type of yeast that's being used. So for us, it's really, we've got to be able to buy bulk volumes of it and on a regular basis, because it goes right down the drain when we're done.
Yeah, 30 barrels at that scale would be like almost $2,000 in yeast, which is insane.
It's very cost prohibitive, obviously.
You just blew Reverend's mind with 60 barrels.
Yeah, that's insane. 60.
Also,
Yes. By the way, if you guys ever want to see, what their tanks look like, let us know. We were there on a live stream not too long ago, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think on our social media, there's been a few posts recently that kind of show the setup a little bit to scale with some people in there, so you can kind of see their
Okay. Instagram.
Instagram at Trailbreaker Cider.
I got it.
That's on it.
Also,
That's where we
Trent, just so you are aware, Reverend makes cider on Whidbey Island, so he's going to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So,
Is he still making cider, or is he to a brewery now?
no, he was at a brewery.
Was at a brewery, now he does cider.
Wait,
Got it.
what island is he on?
Whidbey.
Would
Would
be,
be okay.
yeah. So
What's the other big one over there? Vashon has a lot of apples. I think there's a cidery on Vashon. Island
And Reverend
across
actually did
from-
have another question. When you're going dry and you do that so nicely, is what he said, do you have a nutrition schedule that you follow for your yeast?
Nope. What I self-admittedly call myself a minimalist when it comes to cider making. We use a very hands-off approach. We don't kill any of the natural yeasts that are coming off the apples. We found that the pitched yeast definitely dominates that microorganism structure in there, so it doesn't do a lot.
Yeah.
We have fairly clean. We're really relying on filtration,
Yeah.
and we've invested pretty heavily throughout the years on making sure we have nicely filtered products so we can remove anything that we want. We use some enzymes to help break down pectin, so we use a pectinase.
Yep.
That helps those pectin chains, as it was described to me, it's like can really prevent the yeast from properly obtaining the sugars. The pectinase helps get a better fermentation, a more complete fermentation, so you don't have any residual sugar remaining. But we ferment completely dry on everything. 3 months is ideal for us, which is pretty similar to like a Chardonnay or a fruitier wine even.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're super minimalist. I'm not trying to micromanage something that we can make pretty consistently. Consistency for me was the key.
Right. What ABV does your base cider get up to?
About 7%. That's most apples. The sugar combination that we get from that is about 7%.
Yeah, so that gives you some room to blend and
Yep.
get back to that 5%.
Yeah, exactly. Most of our finished ciders are usually between 5 and 6%,
Yeah, nice.
depending
And
on how
I'm
sweet
going to
or-
pause real quick. What are we currently drinking?
This
That's a good question.
This is our Sun's Out. So this is what I call a single varietal, not single varietal on the fermentation. This uses our standard base, and we back sweeten with a single varietal, which is Pink Lady apple. So it's super
nice.
tart, tastes like a mild version of a Pink Lady apple. It's like taking a small bite each time.
It's got some floral components to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been very popular, I think, for a couple reasons. One, the name, Sun's Out. We've been begging for sun for the last 4 months, and that's about when we came out with it. So
I think this is the first weekend we actually get it.
yeah, exactly.
Not a giant rainstorm.
So a little bit of that, and also I think anybody that tries this, it's a little on the sweeter side, sweet and tart, but I wouldn't call it, like most of our ciders, I would not call this a sweet cider by any stretch. Maybe a semi-sweet.
Yeah, semi-sweet, slightly off dry. It's above off dry, but it's
It's got I probably would drink maybe 1 or 2 of these before that's enough sweetness for me. I tend to be a drier cider fan anyway.
And most of your ciders are really dry. That's one of the reasons that we keep buying a lot of your stuff, is because I like the fact that like your sweetest cider isn't super sweet. Your sweetest
We
cider
aim
is like sweet
for
enough.
sessionability on every single cider we make. Occasionally we'll come up with something really bold. We do some barrel-aged ciders that are definitely sippers. I mean, you've got to be a little bit more of an enthusiast to appreciate some of those subtle flavors that are not just apple.
Yeah.
But yeah, dryness and not sugary, syrupy is definitely our goal.
Yeah, and we buy a lot of them because they're all really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've kind of gone over the basics of cider. On cider, you've got dry, you've got off dry, semi-sweet, sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've got
I
the
think
heritage stuff. You've got the
Seattle cider a number of years ago started providing like a scale, and I don't remember if it was a numeric scale or just a scale of kind of dryness, sweetness.
Yeah.
And I think hoping to standardize it. And I didn't necessarily, it's one of those things that sweetness is so subjective that I think it's a good idea to develop that, but it hasn't quite formalized a standard for which everybody can use. But I think more and more when you see cider somewhere in the descriptor or even in the name or somewhere on that can, will kind of help guide you towards that. But the sweetness tends to be kind of the main focal point of ciders.
How sweet or how not sweet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of varying. So beer is like overly categorized in my opinion. It's like the same beer could probably be called two different things, and there's probably hundreds and hundreds of breweries in the United States that mislabel their beer just because it's like it's close enough to this, and it's going to be more marketable like this. Like it just doesn't.
It becomes a marketing thing, really.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, beer to me, especially when I get around some, a brewers group, most of everything is going over my head. On a fundamental level, we do almost the same thing. I get that. But there are obvious differences, especially when you start getting into the nuances of specifics between each variety or each type of beer.
Yeah, I like inside of that you can go to like you got heritage versus maybe the more American style.
Yeah.
And that's still kind of getting too much into categorization for mine because I feel like yours kind of feel like a lot of them taste a little bit more Old English. They have kind of, not, it's not a direct, super neutral fermentation with, and just letting whatever heritage apple shine. But it's like just one step away from that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's, you've got that heritage feel and then that one step away that you're like, but it's got my own flair.
Yeah. And, the biggest challenge here, there's some cider schools and they tend to, on the west side of the state, they tend to focus on European as the standard. We don't have the same apples.
Yeah.
And so, that lends itself, it's like, well, we have to make slightly sweeter cider. They are sweet apples. It's hard to make a bitter flavor out of something that isn't in that category. So beer obviously opens up many more doors.
Yeah, we can easily get barley from Europe and whatever.
And just the flavor profiles are so widely differing with beer as well.
And the actual cooking process is a lot of what we can do to manipulate it. Where you're kind of in the whatever wine we've got is what that's the wine we can make.
The biggest thing for us too, that this wasn't a thing when we started, but within about a year or two after, the gluten-free trend.
Yeah.
Cider, and in our own ownership and family, this has become a pretty big deal on the health side. So that's the other element that we're now trying to experiment maybe in a little bit of those. What was it? The hop ciders became a thing, right? And I always said, I'm like, well, if you want hops, just go get a beer. But it turns out not everybody can do that. So I do see reasons where the two are starting to meld in some of those stylistically for some of very valid reasons.
Yeah, and on the hop cider thing, that's been a whole new world for me to get into because people want to do hop seltzers too, and they want to try hop ciders. Yeah. There's very few hop ciders that I've tried and actually liked. And I think a big part of it is for me, I have very specific things that I'm looking for with hops.
Sure.
And
you're a beer snob, so that's going to happen.
It makes a little bit of sense. But I mean, most of the hop ciders, I get it, but if you're just adding it in as a flavoring component, as a floral component, why not just use any other flower?
I totally agree, and our cider maker Cody, we kind of go back and forth, not in a bad way, just kind of debating this concept. And I've always said I want it to be really good if we're going to do it, not just do it for the sake of doing it. And he's experimented with that a little bit. Neither one of us have found something we love and really let that shine. It's more of a, it's obviously dry hopping and that has its own limitations.
I think to get the maximum hop juice, I think there's got to be like a whirlpool component where you take some concentrate that's got to have sugars in it to get some of the components out. So you gotta have that whirlpool where you blend your hops in with some sugar content, maybe an apple concentrate, and then maybe get all the juice squeezed out. But at the same time, if it's I get dry hopping, and I get that there's a lot of nostalgia behind hops, and there's some hops that have really, really good flavors that go with them. But for the most part, I'm also like, this could be any other flower. This could be lavender. This could be.
We do a lot of lavender ciders. We do hibiscus ciders. Trying to think of, those are the two big ones, and I love those ciders. They are. We make almost like a tea extract that we can then blend in with the fermented cider.
Yeah.
And it's a really good way, like it's kind of dry hopping in a different method, and creating those extracts is a way. I mean, what I was going to say before too is our process is literally when we come up with a recipe, we have little measuring cups, and then all we're doing is taking our bright tank and turning that into a big measuring cup. And so if we can make our own little extracts and little kind of concoctions that are in large batches, and then we freeze it or keep it in storage in some way, and use that like a chef would use something in his kitchen.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, what did the
This is the new one that you haven't released yet.
Oh,
Super secret, about to be not a secret.
I believe this is,
You labeled PA on the top.
yeah, so this is a peach apricot that we just blended this week. Very fruit forward. So this is probably something that, to me, it's like, I eat a lot of dried apricots, or if you've ever eaten a fruit leather
Yeah.
that's apricot flavored, this is like having one of those. It's a little on the sweet side intentionally. It's meant to be more of a summer dessert, if you will, after dinner snack. But it's probably a little heavy on the apricot. But I think a lot of these fruit flavors, if the peach isn't there, it's way too one-dimensional. So it's more of a subtle way to kind of bring the whole fruit forward.
So this is really, really good, by the way. But the last two, both the Pink Lady and this one, the thing that I've noticed on both of them, you said you don't kill off the wild yeast that are on the apples, right? They just go right into fermentation.
Correct. Yeah.
Both of these have had a little bit of Brett character.
Yeah,
And
they can.
I kind of love it. Like it's like, it's not overly. I am just trying to make a apple juice flavored sweet neutral cider. Like it's got a little bit of character.
It's got
to
a
it.
little funkiness. I mean, I wouldn't even
It's
call
not
it that.
funky.
It's
It's
cleaned up so much too with the filtration, but it has that, kind of that overarching. It's almost like a wild fermentation.
It tastes like
quality,
natural fermentation.
but really, really subtle.
Exactly. It's not. Yeah. It's not like that giant Brett fermentation where it's super barnyardy, but it's like
you're gonna feel like you're drinking something that is authentic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very clean and refined, but it's authentically fermented, no doubt about that. And
it comes out a little bit more in this one, and I love how that goes in with the peach flavor. That's really good. It made me excited.
You mentioned the Brett. We make sours, and some of those, I mean, they can, we call it's kind of our funky series is what we call it on the board, and
That's one of my favorite series.
yeah, I'd like to say we always plan a lot of those, but we know that those bacteria are present. So we can kind of toss a small batch in a direction and monitor it a little bit, and then kind of just process and finish it when we think it's got those qualities. So it's a little different than a brewery would have to approach a sour, I'm sure, but we've kind of got our own processes for producing that.
That's really cool.
And some of the early batches were totally non-intentional, but when you have something like that, it's like, there's an audience for this. It's not a total mistake. It went in a direction that we need. Now we know how to control that.
Yeah, I mean, it's natural too. I mean, and that's why like a lot of traditional French wineries, they lean into the Brett fermentation, the wild fermentation. They knew it was there.
Yeah.
And they just created a different character around that. So
yeah, and keep in mind that when you do try our ciders, we have sterile filtered everything.
Yeah.
So that's an absolute sterile filtration. We're fairly confident with all kinds of lab tests that we have removed that. When you put it in a package, that's a little different story, but for anything you have on draft at our place, it's clean. So if you're tasting something, the flavor's been imparted, but it's been cleaned up to a point where it again is sessionable.
Which is good if you end up being one of the people that get like a little bit bloaty from yeast. Because I know some people are out there that do that.
It's if you've sat and drank sours all afternoon,
yeah, you know.
If
you know, you know. But the flavor is there, and I think the flavor on this one made me really excited.
Yeah,
like, this is a really good flavor.
I like this. Again, I brought these because I think they're interesting, but I For me, this is probably a little sweet for my personal liking, but I still like, it's like having a glass of lemonade on a hot day. It's
Right.
still nice to have. I mean,
Exactly.
I don't not like it.
Yeah, this one's coming down into, this one's less sweet than the last one, but this is coming down into that,
Yep.
like where I'd like it, personally.
Aaron had a good question.
Let's hit it.
I'm a big fan of Basque.
Basque.
Basque? Okay.
That's Spanish.
Style ciders. Is it hard to find the high acidity apples here?
It is, yeah. We don't have the Basque cider. I'm not like an expert on, but a lot of the Basque cider is also the experience in Spain. They do the crazy pouring, and they use a lot of traditional techniques. Their apple selection is definitely more acidic than what we get here. If we were to, our acidic apples are also very sweet apples. Granny Smith, Pink Lady,
Pie apples.
Yeah, they're pie apples. And in the Northwest, where I grew up in Michigan, there's a lot more availability for some of those apples, just because it's not quite as industrialized as the state of Washington has become. Washington is probably the largest apple producing region in the world, or certainly in the top 3. And that's a different kind of approach that the orchardists have than some of the older orchards that you get on the East Coast and Midwest. So New York, Michigan, you probably would have a better chance of getting juice from those regions. We try, but it's just not in the cards.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We do partner with a organization here in town called the Edible Tree Project. And if you haven't checked them out, they do some really good things.
Matt's on it.
They have a volunteer group. I think they're kind of just getting going on some of the social media element, but they are a nonprofit that has volunteers that pick apples in parks all around Spokane County, parks,
What was the
people's
name of it again?
backyards. Edible Tree Project, I think is what it is. And they, what they've been doing now, if you go to our place, there's a cider that we still have on. We made late in the fall, large batch of it called Apple Spice. So it's a spiced apple. All those apples that we used in that were grown here, picked by volunteers, and we take a good chunk of those proceeds and give them back for their fundraising efforts. They usually take their apples to food banks, but occasionally what happens is they get a lot of crab apples, which have the acidity that we need, and anything that they can pick that is maybe we thrive in the imperfect apple world.
Yeah.
So if it's not great for a human to look at and want to eat, we make juice out of it.
Yeah.
And we have a saying, we make ugly apples really happy.
Yeah. There's Finn River did something similar too, because Finn River was right by an
Mhm.
old orchard. They had, it was their late harvest apples.
Mm-hmm.
They called it like the rotted tree or something like that. But
Yeah, they're over on the Olympic Peninsula, I think,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So they probably have some
Different.
unique grow. They don't have frost issues.
yeah,
What we run into here is we have to pick crab apples early because, the last couple of years we've gotten weird early frosts, and it just destroys the fruit. It basically takes all the juice and coagulates it, so you can't really get much out of it.
gotcha.
And picking crab apples is like picking cherries. If you've ever done that, it's not all that fun.
Yeah,
So it's pretty labor intensive, but a little goes a long way with that too. It doesn't take much of that juice to flavor one of our base ciders in a way
Right.
that's pretty unique.
nice. Are we caught up on questions after that?
Yeah. It also, I was looking at the link to the Spokane Edible Tree Project, and it looks like they do a lot of gleaning. So do you want to dive into what gleaning is? Because I know that's a term that most beer people don't know.
I don't know that term.
So gleaning, if I'm understanding it correctly, is kind of like a sorting process. When we get apples, they've been processed and sorted. Typically, for anything we're doing, it's somebody before it's arrived at our facility has probably handled some of that, getting rid of anything that shouldn't be there, I guess is the long and the short of it, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Well, I was going to say, so my understanding of gleaning, I just double checked, is collecting the leftover crops. So it's
Sure.
Yeah. So it's people that go into like the apple orchards and get the apples that may have fallen on the ground
Yeah.
and stuff, and like to collect a lot of, because there's a lot of usable fruit.
So gleaning is essentially what we're getting from like the Edible Tree Project. So they're gleaning the whole tree or all of the trees that they can find. What sometimes will happen is, and we end up getting this fruit anyway, if a orchard in the central part of the state was hit with hail, the apples can get very bruised or discolored that way. And the orchardist then has to make a decision. The grocery store is not interested in them, but is it worth it to pick them to take to market? Sometimes it's just part of an orchard, so they get picked anyway and sorted on the back end. So the gleaning, I guess, would obviously is probably more looking at more localized trees and not massive orchards that we typically work with.
But another way to eliminate waste, which is good.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I look at orchards and I'm like, oh, we could turn that into so much booze.
So much booze. That's awesome. You want to dive into kind of like from start to finish how growing a cidery worked for you?
Yeah, so I started making cider before I was old enough to buy alcohol.
Smart.
When I went to Michigan State University, and my buddies and I had a friend invite me to some party in a town outside of the city, and went down into a basement of a barn, and I had never had it before, but they basically had barrel fermented hard cider.
Wow.
It was probably in that 7 to 8% alcohol range, but the next morning I woke up and I was like, that was weird. That was not like drinking beer. That was not like, I wasn't really into drinking wine yet at that age, but I was like, that was just a different experience. I felt like at no point during the evening was I really tipsy, but then the next morning I was like, I almost remember nothing, but I know I didn't drink very much because I just had these tiny little cups. So it was a very different experience, and after looking into it a little bit, I learned that, you know, cider used to be made in this country for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. And before Prohibition, it was, I mean, people got part of their paycheck with cider. I mean, way back in the day, that was what happened. And so I started playing around with homebrew at that point. It was very easy to get, before barrel aging was a big thing for breweries. Mm-hmm. You could get whiskey barrels from Kentucky and Tennessee for like $50. And so when I moved to Washington State, to Pullman, I bought one of those and started making batches of cider in my garage. And the first challenge when you're doing that is, where do I get the juice?
Yeah.
You know, I'd always heard Washington was an apple producing state, but in Pullman I didn't see any apple trees, obviously.
Yeah. So
I started kind of venturing out in Wenatchee area and north of there, the Wenatchee River Valley, and getting juice from some farmers up there that had some small press operations and bringing the juice back this way. And after leaving for culinary school and kind of working with that a little bit more, I took a winemaking class while at school in Seattle, and I really wanted to figure out a way to make really good cider. Mm-hmm. And this was maybe around 2010, before ciders had really started taking off to what we know now. And I went to a buddy of mine and I was like, I'm thinking about starting a cidery. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm kind of taking a class now on what some basics of winemaking, or what, you know, where do you buy hoses? Where do you buy pumps? Where do you know, what are the tanks made of? How does all this stuff work? And just trying to wrap my head around it. And that still to this date has been the biggest challenge, is not only bringing half brewery, half winery world together to make cider, but, you know, the how-to. And there's no book written on this stuff, or at least there wasn't that I found
yet.
Yeah,
we're gonna do a series of the trend. It's gonna come soon.
Yeah, good luck with that. But, you know, just kind of tiptoeing down that path, I think one of the things that got us kick-started was my business partner and now brother-in-law. He made a big mistake when we started our business. He introduced me to his sister, who's now my wife. So that did not turn out so well for him. But he was building a building, and I think
Yeah.
maybe you were in that building down in Pullman, or
Yeah.
out by the airport there, and
Yep.
that long story led us to move up here. But I think one of the biggest barriers, and we talk a lot about business and what it takes to get a business going, and one of the biggest barriers is the space, right?
Yeah.
And the cost of that space. And he was pretty forward thinking in the idea that, well, let's just start it somewhere. We need somewhere to start it. Let's not worry about, justifying every little thing you do to make a rent payment, and, getting started. You need the ability to experiment. You got to figure out, what you're going to be making without a lot of that risk and financial risk, especially. So
Yeah, you gotta be willing to lose before you can win, or else you're gonna be paralyzed.
yeah. And, and quite honestly, fortunately it was for me, I could do this, live like a dirtbag, and quit my job and live on nothing for 2 or 3 years while we figure this out and start saving and putting money into the pieces to start building it.
Yeah.
The beer, wine, cider industry is capital intensive, so
Yeah.
it takes some sacrifices on the other end of life to be able to do it, and that was probably the biggest hurdle for us.
Gotcha.
But also just messing up and learning,
Yeah.
and trying not to make the same mistake twice,
Yeah.
even though that probably has happened many times.
I've made a lot of mistakes along my journey, so I can definitely equate to that.
It's how we learn, I guess.
You can't, especially if you're starting without somebody that's like guiding you through and teaching you everything like that. If you're jumping in blindly, which I think most of us in the beer industry kind of have,
Yeah.
unless you like went to school for how to be a proper beer industry person, in which case I kind of think you're boring.
Yeah. To me, it's kind of that balance of art.
Mm-hmm.
Some business elements of it are huge, but you've got to be able to blend those two things, and
Right.
that's a tricky line, and focus on both making money, obviously, but
Yeah.
also making good stuff. And I've always been of the mindset that if you do it right, eventually that will happen. It's easier said than done, that's for sure.
Yeah, I also think having a passion for what you do is really important. I think
Yeah.
being a part of what you do and being invested in what you do is a big part of what people see on the back end. And even if you're small scale like us, so this little backstory on this whole build out here was about $35,000 for us. So I think all in between every person that's put in money, myself, Tim, Logan, my parents, I think we're probably all in like $65,000.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, probably the lowest investment out of any brewery in Spokane, if I had to guess. But I think a lot of people have followed us because they found our passion, and a big part of that is us putting it online. But
Yeah.
I was gonna say maybe not Jeff and Candy.
If,
They're
oh yeah,
investment.
yeah.
if
Well,
there's
yeah.
one thing,
No,
I
they
mean,
put in that much on their new pole barn that they're building. So
Well, but initially,
initially, that's true.
if there's one thing I will say, I follow you guys a lot, probably not as much as I could. You guys have a lot of media content out there, which is awesome, is passion. And I think you absolutely hit that on the head. I don't recognize that as much in myself. I've never thought of, oh yeah, it's, it's just what I've enjoyed doing. And I think passion is something that others recognize more than I do. But I've told people, I never even, we built our building that we're in. My father-in-law and I did most of the work along with my brother-in-law a little bit. And to put in that level of work, but never feel like I was at a day job or at a job. That I think is what people recognize as passion.
Yes.
Like you're there every day. I'm like, I love it. Like, I don't mind being in that facility, even in some hectic moments. But we're also kind of very heavy now on the retail side of things. I mean,
Yes.
that facility blew up in that way more than I was anticipating, and that became our focus. So,
Which I think that's good.
different kind of passion. It's pulled out a piece of me that I'm very passionate about food. That's something I do recognize.
Yeah.
So having an outlet for that and the cider, it's easily a dream come true for me without ever
Nice.
consciously thinking about what that would look like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's something powerful to say that you get to go and do what you like to do, and then also do the hard stuff. I mean, it's never easy. Even if it's your passion, it's never easy. I think people don't realize that are on the other side. They're like, oh, I want to start a brewery, I want to start a cidery, and I think because they love it, it's going to be easy. It's
definitely not easy.
Yeah. There's some struggles. There's some. I think I've had pitfalls. I think you probably have
Yeah.
experienced the same thing. Like we've had those moments where you're like, is this worth it? But
Is this gonna work? I don't know if this is gonna work. I feel like this is maybe failing.
Exactly. Yeah. There's those moments in a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
So it's never just flip a switch and all of a sudden you're doing what you love for a living. There's a lot of stuff, even if you're in the industry that you love, that you do that.
Do you
kinda
remember Moscow Brewing
Yeah.
when they first started? Lucas started it, and he and I had some really deep, in-depth conversations about philosophically, what we're doing, and somebody that was super passionate about making beer and had, I think, a 3-barrel system or something.
I think it's smaller than that.
Yeah, one barrel or something. I don't remember exactly, but it was, he just said, I make beer 5 days a week, and I turn around at the end of the weekend, it's all gone, I've sold it, and then I do it again next week. And he said, after a year of doing that, I might be done with this. And he sold the company and went on to do some other things, which is fine. But it turned his passion into something that was maybe a little harder to be passionate about, which is just grunt work.
Exactly.
And that's where there's no easy answer. We got really lucky with a few things, really unlucky with a few things, but that constant drive, I have, for whatever reason, a slight ability to kind of look at the long game.
Yeah.
And I think that's also what it takes, is to be able to absorb those minor bumps in the road or major bumps in the road.
Yeah,
and
even
think
major
about
ones,
the
yeah.
long.
Yeah, even when you're really, really down, I think the ability to look forward is huge, and I think that's something that's gotten me to where I'm at too. Because we've had that going into here. Like there's some times that I stopped and I was like, I don't know if this is all going to get done. Like we've had, so we moved here, we were closed down for over 7 months because we had to build this place.
Yeah.
And then the very next year, COVID hit, so we were down for
Yeah,
another.
you and I opened our places within months of each other, and
Yeah.
then COVID hit, and it was like, trust me, there was plenty of mutual respect there.
Yeah.
Not only getting through that, but just getting to that point to even open a place like this. I mean, this is an awesome spot here in the valley that I know, again, there's, my wife and I were just talking about all the breweries in Spokane. I said, the thing is, though, every neighborhood needs a brewery.
Yeah.
Most breweries can survive or seem to survive with their locals and people that come in there. So
Be a community partner.
It's a big part. We're seeing communities change in these housing developments, new housing developments. You look at what's happening in Liberty Lake there and elsewhere. They're putting breweries, cideries, wineries, whatever, in communities, in housing areas, because that's what we all like to do in a little bit of our free time, even if we're
exactly.
That's a good addition, and we got away from a lot of that for many years when we built, strictly housing, strictly retail, and it's like, seeing that come back is awesome. Obviously for breweries, I mean, whether it's Yaya's over here in that section of town, or any of the others that
you got Snow Eater right next to you.
Yep.
And they've been fun to have
I was
around.
gonna say on the other side, Liberty Lake, Emery's is going in.
Yeah, Emerson is going in.
Yep.
Okay.
Actually, I just saw. Has anybody heard of Radio Brewing out of Kellogg?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're opening something there. The Bike Hub's putting a building next to us, and on their sign I saw Radio Brewing logo on there. So I don't know if they're doing
cool.
just like a little.
So the head
retail space.
the head brewer there. There's so many people here that I've actually so the guy that bought Moscow Brewing Company, his name's Andy.
Okay.
And his wife's also named Andy.
Okay.
And my wife knew him before I knew him, but I knew him because I helped him get his first batch of beer when I worked at Tri-State.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then the guy that
that's
is
right.
the
Yeah,
head
you
brewer
worked
at Radio Brewing, I also helped him do his
It's
first.
a small
batch.
world.
Yeah.
Especially on the beer side of it.
Yeah.
When I get together with any of my brewer friends, they start throwing names around. I'm like, I'm just removed enough from that circle to kind of know who people are talking about. But
I know that person.
yeah, we partner with so many breweries. You guys are obviously a good example of it.
Yeah.
That serve our cider. I mean, a brewery serving a cider is almost a necessity now. If everybody in a group can't drink beer, or there's always somebody in a
Yeah.
group, that can't drink beer, it seems. So
A lot of people come here for the pizza too, and so
Yeah.
they don't necessarily want beer. They want like wine or cider, and we're like,
Mhm.
oh, we got cider.
yep, it's a neighborhood spot. You
Yeah.
want to go into those things.
Exactly. What cider are we drinking, by the way?
So this is actually a seltzer, which is still a cider. I tell people,
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe you can enlighten me on this. I get so many questions about this. What defines a seltzer?
So for me, it's sugar content source or neutrality. Emrys is doing the same kind of thing. They're doing a honey seltzer. So overall neutrality, I would say if you were to do this exact thing but 100% dry, would scream more seltzer to me. For us, we make seltzers with corn sugar,
Okay.
100% dextrose. But I know you can do any sugar source for a seltzer.
Yeah.
Overall, it's neutrality.
Yeah. My thought is that it's exactly. That's maybe a little more technical than I would even put it. I was just thinking it. For us, we intentionally add some water content to our cider to kind of mellow it out a little bit, get it as benign as possible, and then throw a splash of flavor.
Yeah.
Our seltzers, we've intentionally made. It's funny, with our ciders, we aim for super subtle flavors.
Right.
But with our seltzers, we've aimed for stronger flavors,
Right.
bolder fruit flavors.
Right.
This is our lemon lime seltzer, and to me, this is like a less sweet Sprite.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I think of when I taste it.
It's very good.
Light. This is.
I do get the Sprite. Yeah, you get the
This
Sprite.
is meant for we can this, or we'll soon be canning it for retail sale elsewhere, for hanging out on a river. I've started drinking more and more seltzers because they're, if I'm gonna drink 4 or 5 cans of something on a hot day, it's
Goes
it's
easy,
to drink. It's refreshing.
Doesn't weigh down the palate.
Yep, and I feel like we're always acquiring some kind of seltzer. Now that we buy seltzers, I keep some in the fridge at all times.
Oh yeah.
And this is just one of the 4 that we initially came out with.
Yeah, I like it. I think one way to do a seltzer that's sweeter would be, I don't know. I was gonna say to do like a non-fermentable sugar, but even then I'm like, it's still sugar. Doesn't really matter. You can do sweet seltzers too.
These seltzers are, I don't know. I don't think there's a wrong answer with any seltzer. It seems
Not
there's
really,
no book. I think we all know what to expect. A lighter beverage, something.
Mike's Hard
fruitier.
Lemonade is now like lemonade seltzer.
Yeah,
Like, no one cares.
Yeah,
People are making milkshake seltzers now. Or
Really?
smoothie seltzers, like all that's happening.
Sky's the limit, I guess. I don't know. Some things, obviously, we've seen fads in the beverage industry, and I think cider at one point was maybe thought of as a fad. I was pretty certain that was going to stick around. Seltzer is another one that, to me, our cider actually, we are back in Pullman. I don't know if you remember this, but we made one called a common cider, and it was exactly how we make seltzer now.
Yeah.
But it was basically an apple seltzers, 3.5% alcohol, 3 to 4% alcohol, depending on the batch, which is super light, super sessionable.
Yep.
We're actually making it again now because I said at the time, I think most people weren't ready for like a light, in France, they walk around drinking 2.5% cider
All
on their
day,
lunch
yeah.
break. It's not enough alcohol to get you tipsy.
But it's enough to carry some flavors behind it.
Yeah, carry some flavors. It has a little bit of a maybe we could all use a little relaxation during the day.
Usually.
Yeah, I know. I do.
Yeah. I don't at all.
Yeah.
Let's see. We're getting up to that 10 o'clock range. Let's try to grab some questions. Hey, Frazzle Penguin. Let's see if there's any more questions before we close it out. Let's try to close it out a little bit after 10.
I did see one comment on here a little earlier about somebody using like Kirkland juice or like generic apple juice to make cider.
That's Lars who just did his first cider 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And he's going to send us, because he also whirlpooled some hops into it. So,
Okay.
hey, we talked about that. Bring it.
I tell you, we've experimented with. So we make all our own juice in house, but for a while, logistically, we were looking at maybe just buying juice.
Yeah, he's also going to start selling us some juice for making grafts and stuff like that.
Yeah, we do that we partner with Yaya's. We'll press some apples for them to use in some of their brews in the fall.
Nice.
We do all kinds of stuff like that. We love to just get involved in any way we can. But
Homebrew day this fall.
sure,
Press out some 5-gallon batches for
Yeah,
some homebrewers in Spokane.
that'd be fun. Yeah, we would, yeah, bring all your toys with you with the sound and video.
Yeah.
But we've played with literally juice that you can buy at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to the yeast. I mean, you can make a decent drinkable cider out of that.
100%.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's I think you lose some of the body that's there
I think you need the tannin and the
Yep.
acidity. That's what you're missing.
I mean, part of the reason we use Red Delicious apples, it's like the most recognizable apple smell. If you walk into a room that's full of Red Delicious apples, everybody will recognize it immediately, and you get some of the tannin structure off of that. You lose that component, but you can make some very drinkable cider.
One of my tricks is a cranberry concentrate. Because cranberry comes with acidity, it comes with tannin. So if you're making a home brewed cider out of just store-bought juice, cranberry concentrate.
That's a really good idea. Yeah. We use all kinds of different fruit products that contain more body elements than just flavored for that very reason.
Yeah.
Ginger is one that will add a body element if you put the whole ginger into the actual juice, and we kind of mix it and then strain it off, but depending on what we're doing.
Nice. Let's see. So Lars just brewed his first cider. Used Lutra and Quike. Did a Citra Whirlpool at 170. Hoping it comes out well. So that's something that homebrewers have an advantage over big commercial cideries, is we can kind of use all our homebrew equipment to make the same kind of stuff. So I think it would be fun if someone did an experiment doing a hop cider with a Whirlpool edition versus doing a hop cider with a dry hop edition.
Gotcha. Yeah. There's one of the things I love about cider and always have is you can just play. Like there is no. We don't have rules, right?
Yeah.
And I know brewers, anybody, not just brewers, distillery operators, anybody that's got their niche, winemakers especially do this, kind of get stuck in their tunnel vision. And we thrive without any tunnel and just
you can try whatever
we can do. And you've been to our place. There's 20 ciders on the board that we make in house, and I mean every time somebody comes in there, they're kind of like, oh my, that's a lot. Where do I be? It's like, just dive in. Just start tasting them. There's all of our ciders tend to run in the same vein of flavors. I mean, we use the same base, right? Or one of a couple bases. So you can't get too far off that, and it's hard on that level of production to go crazy. But we do, on our pilot system, make some weird stuff that I think captures the attention a little bit more.
Yeah, well, all your stuff I think captures attention really well, especially like spicy peach. The fact that you add just flavors that kind of come from everywhere, I think that helps out quite a bit. But I love that idea, and if you ever want to do a collab on a hop experiment, I'd be down for that.
Yeah, actually, so full disclosure, I am not our cider maker anymore. However, Cody, who is Cody Franks, he grew up here in Spokane Valley, went to CV High School, so he's kind of returned home. He's our man for sure. But we work very closely together. Yeah. My palate, his palate. He'll run everything by me once or twice just to kind of, it's good to be in this world, and so we kind of have that.
I'm not a brewer anymore, so
I have a useful palate, I think. And so
you're around it enough, and you think about it.
Yeah, it's good. I like anything. If I'm building something, I like to bounce an idea off somebody who knows what they're looking at. So it's the same kind of idea, but he and you, or he and Tim should definitely start diving into the hops, because I know that's one of his number one goals over the last 5 years has been to come up with the best hop cider out there. That's his goal.
That'd be awesome.
I was gonna say I'm more than happy to start helping, because I'm already doing some hop experiment and hop categorizing.
Well, we've got we also we're doing some reorganization too, so Tim might actually have some free time for experimenting too.
Yeah, this fall would be a good time to do that, because the fall is when we can get apples, right? I mean, we can get weird varieties of apples, and we have always extras to kind of play and experiment with. That's when we do most of our experimenting. And
that's when hops are harvested. So goals.
Jimmy had a question.
Is the soluble oak a good addition when that product gets released? Soluble oak, very interesting. I am not the person to answer on that. That would be Thomas.
I don't know anything about soluble oak. Is that like an extract or something?
It's so technically they call it not an extract. So there's a guy that's in Spokane that Thomas Croskery, Emerson Fermentations, hooked up with through Gonzaga or Whitworth or one of the colleges around here, and I have no idea how this guy got his business started, but Thomas has been making a lot of aged things using the soluble oak. And oak is an interesting, chemically speaking, oak is very interesting. It does things to all the beverages that in that aren't just add oak flavor.
Sure.
They add a lot of compounds that like create shelf stability, get rid of other bad compounds. They do a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah, it is interesting because whenever we've put product into oak barrel, typically the barrel's been used for something else.
Right.
It like never changes after that.
Yeah.
Like you put it in a keg,
It's the same.
it tastes the exact same now as it did 2
Yeah.
years ago, which there must be something to, because that seems to be the only products we're able to do that with.
Yeah, there's actual chemical components that are in the oak that do that. I don't know what they are, but this guy has been working for the last 6-7 years on making soluble oak. Don't know how he's doing it. It's proprietary. He
Interesting.
patented it, but his products are coming out this year.
You
and,
guys sell any of that stuff here?
I won't. The guy's local though, so
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
we can get you plugged in for sure.
Just curious about it more than anything.
But we did one video actually where we basically got all our beers, dosed different of his soluble oaks into the beers, and each of them tasted different. I would say most of them tasted better with it.
I'm intrigued.
I was also,
Yeah,
and
I
still
don't
am.
see a downside.
That's a way of
playing
saying,
with
Jimmy, I don't know how to answer your question. I'm not the person to answer your question, but I have the same question as you, and I'm very interested in that question.
Cool.
I'm trying to find
Early
that
Worm
video.
says, great guess. Good job.
Oh, sweet. Thanks, Early Worm.
Frazzle Penguin, our homebrew club just brewed 3 beers and 1 cider for a local beer festival. The cider was margarita cider, apple juice fermented, margarita mix, lime juice, and tequila. Yum. Why are you in Canada? Just come down here.
We've just been talking about making a margarita cider. We're gonna put limes through our apple press
Oh, nice.
and get some like legit lime juice.
Yeah.
We found also when you press fruit, if you press it, if you're not just juicing it, but you grind some of that
Pith
peel,
and-
so
yeah.
you get a lot of that bitter component and make like a real margarita.
Yeah.
And in a giant tank. But stay tuned for that one.
Yep, we're doing it for Cinco de Augusta. Is that how they say it? I don't know.
It's coming around the corner.
All right, I think do we have any other questions, Matt, that you can see?
Nope.
Let's do our plugs.
Well, and Frazzle Penguin's planning to make a trip down here.
And he's going to bring us some.
Oh, he said he's going to bring us much homebrew.
Yes.
Sweet.
I'm excited. If he brings the margarita cider, I'm saving you some.
You let me know.
I will let you know. All right, well, thank you so much. Trailbreaker's Instagram is linked, I believe, somewhere up in the chat earlier.
Yeah, I can.
Instagram.com/Trailbreaker
Trailbreaker cider.
Cider.
Yep.
So follow them on Instagram. Follow what's the wrestling one?
Yep. At Relentless Wrestling.
At Relentless
I think
Wrestling.
something like that. Yeah.
If you're in Spokane, follow them so that you can find out when they're doing events at Trailbreaker Cider or anywhere else in town. And follow us. Give us thumbs up. We got an Amazon wish list below. If you make us a purchase on our Amazon wish list, then we'll give you something maybe as little as a shout out, maybe as much as an entire video dedicated to you. Patrick Sandy, your video it's done. We just got to upload it. Happening later on this week.
Also, Patrick, sorry for your loss. He's traveling for a funeral today.
I don't want to talk about that on a live stream. I am also sorry for your loss, but it's a terrible way to end a live stream.
But hey, I was going to say, again, reminder, we will not be live streaming next week, but please still send me question ideas. I'm collecting them also on the Discord.
And if you have not thumbs up this video yet, that's your bad. So fix that.